Do you ever contemplate those African American cake formulas nobody prepares anymore and question how they disappeared? These cakes once saturated Sunday spreads and congregation gatherings with coziness, honor, and household remembrance. When did we cease creating them, and what vanished with them? Pound cake crafted with condensed milk was the variety of cake that united families together well before packaged blends dominated. It was compact, velvety, and luscious in a manner that rendered every portion feel deserving of an assembly. Even on a regular midday, condensed milk provided it a silkiness ordinary milk could not equal, a creaminess that felt like duration and attention. Elder women prepared it for returns, celebrations, and memorial meals, understanding a quality pound cake delivered solace without requiring anything additional. You did not coat it or embellish it. You simply cut it substantial and offered it with dignity. Every household had somebody recognized for crafting the finest one, someone who never documented the formula because the actual phases existed in their palm. But as existence accelerated and ease dominated, condensed milk pound cake disappeared from the spread. Currently, it emerges only at the most profound household occasions, typically when somebody elder demands on restoring it. And when it does, it shows everyone what genuine solace feels like. Sock It to Me cake was the vivid, striking essence of 1970s black cooking spaces, a cake that rendered individuals grin before they even sliced into it. It had a cinnamon and caramelized sweetener spiral flowing through the center, a cheerful astonishment in a realm of basic sweets. Households delivered it to gatherings and Sunday feasts because it was reliable, delicate, and happy. The coating on surface was basic, but provided the cake a gleam that rendered it seem notable. Youngsters adored the spiral. Grown-ups appreciated how effectively it nourished a gathering, and everyone appreciated how rapidly it vanished. It originated from a period when domestic bakers blended packaged cake foundations with handcrafted fillings, producing something novel without abandoning custom. But as preferences shifted, this joyful cake gradually disappeared from festive spreads. Individuals neglected the delight of cutting into that strand of richness. Still, for anyone who recalls the 1970s, one glance at that spiral resurrects kitchens saturated with amusement and radio melodies. Caramel stacked cake was the Sunday focal piece of elder families, a confection constructed around a coating that required waiting and commitment. The tiers were basic sufficient, but the caramel coating was where the honor existed. It had to be blended gradually on the heat, observed intently, and dispensed at precisely the correct instant before it firmed and became grainy. Grandmothers protected that instant like a treasure, depending on feelings no formula could instruct. When it ultimately dispensed, it blanketed each tier in a richness that felt profound and cozy. On festivities, it rested in the middle of the spread like a modest crown. But the duration it demanded was also what eliminated it from contemporary kitchens. Limited individuals currently desire to remain over a heat murmuring wishes into a vessel of sweetener. So, caramel-stacked cake descended into remembrance, valued but seldom crafted. 7-Up cake was the vivid citrus potluck sensation of the 1960s and 1970s. The variety of cake you could identify across a packed congregation basement simply by its amber radiance. The beverage maintained it delicate, airy, and aromatic, rendering each morsel seem buoyant but luscious at the identical moment. Mothers prepared it because it never disappointed, because it cut smoothly, and because it rendered the entire dwelling smell like daylight on a heated midday. Some individuals coated it with citrus frosting. Others abandoned it bare. But regardless, it was a festivity cake, a cake you delivered when you desired to illuminate a space. Youngsters adored the richness. Grown-ups appreciated the tenderness, and everyone appreciated that it felt equally as pleasant on day 2 as it did garden from the stove. But as novel confection movements emerged and beverage cakes declined out of trend, 7-Up cake gradually drifted off the spread. Purchased desserts replaced the handcrafted ones, and the basic brilliance of beverage-based preparation descended quietly into chronicle. Still, anyone who matured with it never neglected the initial morsel. Tender and citrusy and remarkably delicate, like a modest fragment of youth bundled in metal. $1,000,000 cake was the lofty, pineapple-loaded refrigerator cake households preserved for the largest instances, celebrations, festivities, or the variety of assemblies where every relative appeared at once. It was chilled, silky, and soaring, a cake that seemed indulgent, even though it depended on modest components like pressed pineapple, beaten filling, and tender tears. The enchantment was not in elaborate method, but in the manner the sensations merged through the night, converting basic components into something that seemed like festivity itself. Households distributed it around at gatherings, transferred portions onto disposable dishes, and wondered at how revitalizing it felt in the warm southern periods. But as periods shifted and refrigerator cakes abandoned their position to fashionable sweets, million-dollar cake transformed into uncommon. Limited individuals recalled how the tears mellowed precisely sufficient, how the pineapple delivered vibrancy, or how the cake could nourish 20 individuals without a protest. Currently, it endures mostly in handwritten formula notes placed inside aged cookbooks, anticipating for somebody to recall how happy a cooled cake can be. Traditional jam cake was the seasoning-blanketed remembrance guardian of Southern Black households. A cake that utilized fruit preserves, not for embellishment, but for endurance. Before sweetener was simple to purchase and garden fruit was accessible season-round, preserve was what enhanced the mixture and maintained the cake tender. Its hue was profound, its sensation cozy with seasonings like cinnamon and clove, and its consistency robust sufficient to bundle and journey. Households crafted it for festivities or extended travels, understanding it could nourish numerous individuals without deteriorating the sharpness of the preserve blended with the seasonings to generate a sensation that seemed both functional and festive. Grandmothers frequently utilized whatever preserves they possessed, blackberry, peach, fig, providing each cake a character formed by the territory and the time. But as contemporary sweets replaced aged ones and purchased delicacies transformed into simpler, preserve cake disappeared. Limited individuals currently understand the silent contentment of cutting into something enhanced by a summertime harvest maintained through cold season. Its remembrance still remains, though, in the cooking spaces where economy was constantly balanced by imagination. Coconut sheet cake was the pale, delicate festivity cake that signaled Easter, Christmas, and any Sunday when the entire household saturated the dwelling. Garden shredded coconut provided it a mellowness and aroma that no packaged edition can equal, and elder women held honor in the duration it required to grate every fragment by palm. The cake cooked airy and ivory, then chilled underneath a covering of coating that contained the coconut like the initial ice of the season. Households sliced it into portions and offered it on disposable dishes after congregation gathering, assemblies, or festivities that extended late into the midday. But garden coconut was labor, genuine labor, and as alternatives saturated the market passages, the aged edition vanished. Currently, most individuals have solely experienced the packaged edition, but those who recall the genuine one can still sense the chilled richness and hear the grinding of a coconut being split apart on the cooking counter. Chesapeake portions were the compact, creamy confection blocks that saturated school fundraisers, charity sales, and household occasions with a richness that adhered to your digits. They were crafted from basic components: cream cheese, fat, sweetener, and a tender foundation that cooked into something luscious, sufficient to gratify a gathering. Mothers crafted them because they journeyed effectively, cut cleanly, and felt even superior the following day. Youngsters surrounded the spread hoping to seize the edge fragments where the borders browned into an amber bite. But as more contemporary sweets dominated and school occasions shifted, chess cake portions descended out of circulation. Their modesty became eclipsed by fashionable delicacies, and limited individuals recalled how simple and soothing they could be. Still, one morsel of that sugary, silky surface tier can transport you right back to a cafeteria saturated with amusement and portable seats. Hot dairy sponge cake was the silent, buoyant confection that elder grandmothers prepared well before anyone depended on packaged blends to accomplish the task. The heated dairy incorporated into the mixture generated a mellowness that seemed almost weightless, a cake so delicate it scarcely required coating. Households offered it with berries, beaten cream, or simply refined sweetener sprinkled gently on surface. It was the confection you crafted when you desired something fragile, but not excessively sugary, something that seemed handcrafted without demanding for recognition. As preparation movements shifted toward fuller and denser sweets, this delicate sponge cake disappeared. Individuals neglected how gratifying an airy cake could be, how its modesty created space for dialogue and fellowship. Yet, in the silent cooking spaces where elder women still calculate by feeling, hot dairy sponge cake persists like a murmured custom. Texas sheet cake was the single vessel marvel that nourished complete congregation gatherings without ever appearing elaborate. Prepared delicate in a substantial vessel dispensed with heated chocolate coating while still warm, it generated a lustrous surface that split somewhat as it chilled. Households transported it to gatherings, outings, and returns because it cut smoothly and extended distant. It was the cake you crafted when you required something reliable, something that felt luscious but never seemed substantial. Youngsters recalled the heated coating trickling down the edges of the vessel. Grown-ups recalled how one cake could nourish 30 individuals. Yet, as assemblies shifted and confection spreads developed more complex, Texas sheet cake drifted off the festive arrangements. But anyone who matured with it can still shut their gazes and recall the sensation. Tender, chocolatey, and distributed with a space packed with individuals you cherish. Old Southern tea cake loaf was the tender, delicate portion elders delivered out when somebody arrived at the entrance without notice. It was not a biscuit like individuals envision currently, but an ivory loaf seasoned with vanilla, nutmeg, or citrus, prepared for the intention of welcome itself. In many African American dwellings, it rested bundled in protective paper because you never understood when a folk or relative might appear. It did not require coating because the solace existed in the texture and the manner it separated gently alongside a vessel of tea or coffee. Elder women prepared it on silent middays, humming while the cooking space saturated with the aroma of fat and sweetener heating together. Youngsters understood the initial portion went to visitors, but they anticipated for the edge fragments, tender and sugary with additional browning. As visits transformed into scheduled and purchased sweets, replaced handcrafted ones, this basic loaf disappeared. Younger families neglected how one cake on the surface could unlock the entrance to dialogue and bond. Currently, it emerges mostly in narratives from elders who recall cooking spaces that constantly felt cozy and inviting. Yet one morsel is still sufficient to resurrect quiet tones conversing in the adjacent space, coffee heating on the heat, and a dwelling that remained prepared to unlock its entrance. Black walnut cake was the profound, natural festive treasure elders protected like something holy. Black walnuts were difficult to split, difficult to cleanse, and their sensation was striking in a manner nothing else could duplicate. That challenge rendered the cake seem notable, almost ritualistic, particularly in cold season when households assembled in cozy, packed cooking spaces. Many African American dwellings preserved it for Christmas because readying the nuts required genuine duration and genuine waiting. Youngsters assisted split husks on porches, while elder relatives sorted out the tiny fragments inside. The cake cooked into a luscious, smoky richness that purchased sweets never reached, a sensation connected to amusement and custom. But as black walnuts transformed into limited and costly, households ceased preparing it, and younger families never comprehended the contrast ordinary walnuts could not compensate for. Now, the authentic edition is uncommon, maintained alive mostly by elder bakers in countryside communities. Yet, anyone who recalls it can still conjure the sensation, a taste as dignified and unique as the individuals who once crafted it by palm. Molasses seasoning cake was the cozy, economical confection that sustained African American households through scarce seasons well before sweetener was affordable or bakeries were packed with options. Crafted from molasses, seasonings, and a touch fat, it cooked into something far fuller than anyone anticipated from such basic components. During the Depression and well into the 1960s, molasses was the enhancer households depended on because it was economical and constantly accessible. Seasonings like cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger converted the mixture into a deep, aromatic cake that felt like solace and persistence. Youngsters believed this was what festivities were intended to feel like: cozy, compact, profoundly seasoned. Portions journeyed to folks, congregation assemblies, and school meals. But as sweetener developed, cheaper and novel sweets transformed into popular, molasses cake disappeared from sight. Younger bakers rejected it without recognizing how much chronicle existed inside that deep richness. Currently, it rests mostly in aged handwritten formulas, anticipating for somebody to resurrect it. For those who matured with it, no contemporary cake substitutes the firm solace it presented during difficult periods. Butterrum pound cake was the comfortable cold season present transferred from folk to folk when the chill arrived in and festivities approached near. It was a amber cake infused with fat, sweetener, and a dash of spirit seasoning that rendered the entire dwelling smell like coziness. African American households prepared it as a symbol of attention, bundling portions in metal and transporting them to companions, congregation elders, or anyone who required a touch seasonal happiness. The cake cooked compact and silky with a fragile spirits coating dispensed over the surface while still heated. It seemed celebratory without being flashy, sugary without being dominating, and inviting in a manner only handcrafted cakes can be. Youngsters understood this was a mature individual's cake intended for fellowship, not for rushing in and out of the cooking space, seizing fragments. Over the seasons, as communities shifted and entrance-to-entrance visiting transformed into less frequent, the custom of presenting pound cakes mellowed, purchased delicacies assumed their position, and Butter Spirit's pound cake disappeared into remembrance. But anyone who has experienced its creamy richness understands it holds the silent enchantment of fellowship and attention. Banana nut sheet cake was the functional, delicate answer to a cooking space packed with maturing bananas, the variety that marked quicker than households could consume them. Instead of squandering the fruit, elder bakers crushed them into cake mixture, incorporated in nuts, and cooked the blend in a substantial vessel that constantly emerged tender and aromatic. This sheet cake was tender, soothing, and covered with cream cheese coating if the dwelling had the components accessible. It transformed into a beloved for celebrations, gatherings, and evening assemblies, because it nourished a gathering without much difficulty. The sensation seemed homespun, not elaborate, but profoundly gratifying with every morsel. Youngsters removed coating off the edges. Grown-ups valued its modesty, and everyone appreciated how the bananas maintained the cake delicate for periods. But as packaged banana loaves and purchased pastries transformed into frequent handcrafted banana nut sheet cake gradually vanished, the younger families abandoned connection with the happiness of converting nearly deteriorated fruit into something festive. Still, those who recall the aroma of bananas heating in the stove understand this cake held a richness no bakery can equal. Molasses stacked cake adorned weddings and returns with a richness created of waiting and talent. Delicate tiers of seasoned cake were cooked separately, then layered tall with a luscious molasses mixture that absorbed into the texture. As the confection rested through the night, the deep syrup contributed a profound sensation that expressed to both Caribbean cane plantations and southern cooking spaces. Households frequently prepared the tiers periods ahead, converting the construction into a celebratory assembly where relatives and kin labored alongside. Each portion shared a narrative of festivity and persistence. For molasses was economical and abundant even when other enhancers were limited. The cake's lofty, remarkable height rendered it a focal point on spreads arranged for notable events, an emblem of prosperity even in scarce periods. Currently, limited dwellings invest the duration to shape, prepare, and layer so many fragile tiers, and the formula exists mostly in aged household cookbooks. Those who have experienced it understand the silent victory of a confection that compensates effort with enduring remembrance. Hummingbird cake was a confection connected to African American assemblies in the South, merging bananas, pineapple, and seasonings into a tender, tasty cake. It was abundantly coated with cream cheese coating, rendering it luscious and luxurious without being excessively elaborate. The fruit provided the cake organic richness and maintained it delicate, while the seasonings incorporated coziness. Households offered it at gatherings, weddings, and Sunday feasts where it transformed into a focal point confection that attracted praise. Hummingbird cake was frequently distributed around in substantial portions intended to be distributed and savored collectively. Its appeal climbed during the mid-20th century, but over duration it has quietly disappeared from many cooking spaces. Though still recalled in Southern cookbooks, it seldom emerges on contemporary spreads, eclipsed by fashionable sweets. Yet those who recall it understand it held an essence of festivity, a cake that represented prosperity and attention. Hummingbird cake remains one of those formulas that shares a narrative of welcome and happiness, prepared with both fruit and custom. Caramel cake was the centerpiece of every Sunday spread, an amber marvel that resembled festivity and felt like commitment. Mama would remain by the heat, blending sweetener and fat until it converted precisely the correct tone of honey, never allowing it scored. The caramel coating had to be observed, murmured to, and dispensed at the ideal instant. Too early, and it flowed delicate; too delayed, and it hardened like confection. But when she achieved it correct, it covered over tender amber tiers like fabric. The cake was delicate, creamy, and luscious, sufficient to render dialogue cease mid-phrase. Individuals sliced it cautiously, as though it might vanish if managed incorrectly. The richness attached to your molars, the sensation to your soul. Caramel cake was not merely confection. It was a talent, a custom, a present that demonstrated waiting could feel like excellence. It was the confection everyone anticipated for, and nobody declined. Well, after the dishes were cleared, individuals still discussed about that coating, lustrous as crystal and sugary as remembrance. It was a task of devotion and evidence that the finest things in existence require duration, focus, and a firm palm, blended by attention. Prune cake was an economical confection that converted what many regarded a modest component into something luscious and gratifying. African American households cooked prunes until tender, then incorporated them into a seasoned cake mixture packed with cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. The prunes provided the cake a profound richness and tender consistency that endured for periods, rendering it ideal for substantial dwellings or assemblies. It was offered bare or covered with refined sweetener, occasionally with a trickle of basic coating when supplies permitted. Prune cake was functional because prunes preserved effectively in storage and were economical compared to garden fruit. Households appreciated it not merely for economy, but also for solace, since its sensation held coziness and recognition. It was frequently prepared during festivities or distributed at congregation occasions where its luscious scent saturated cooking spaces with expectation. Currently, the cake is seldom witnessed, rejected unfairly by contemporary preferences. Yet it was once cherished, a signal that resourceful bakers could convert basic components into something remarkable. Prune cake represented as evidence that sweets were about soul as much as indulgence. Pineapple inverted cake was absolute Sunday delight prepared in a pan. Mama would dissolve fat and caramelize sweetener first, allowing it simmer precisely sufficient to blanket the foundation before arranging flawless amber circles of pineapple in position. A vivid crimson cherry rested in the middle of each circle like treasures in a crown. The mixture dispensed on surface was substantial and sugary, enclosing the fruit in a sweet coating that browned as it cooked. When it inverted out of the vessel, everyone contained their anticipation until it settled, glistening, amber, and smelling like paradise. The cake was tender and buoyant, the fruit moist and luscious, a harmony of sugary and sharp that nobody could decline. Offered heated with a portion of cream, it was the definition of remarkable modesty. You could sense the honor in every morsel, evidence that loveliness could emerge out of regular things. Pineapple inverted cake was beyond confection. It was an occasion. Households crafted it to honor, to dazzle, or simply to render Sunday seem additionally sugary. The initial portion constantly attracted recognition. The final one, silent exhales. It was the variety of confection that rendered an regular dish seem like an instant deserving recalling. Blackberry preserve cake was a compact seasoned confection that once saturated African American dwellings with its luscious scent. Crafted with cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, the cake was moistened with blackberry preserve blended right into the mixture. It cooked into a deep aromatic loaf that cut substantial and felt of both fruit and seasoning. Households treasured it because it utilized handcrafted preserve, frequently prepared from natural blackberries collected in summertime. This indicated the confection held not solely sensation, but also the remembrance of gathering and maintaining. It was a cake offered on notable events, occasionally coated, but frequently abandoned bare to allow the preserve express for itself. The seasonings provided it complexity, while the preserve maintained it tender for periods, rendering it a functional option in scarce periods. Blackberry preserve cake symbolized custom, innovation, and the delight of extending summertime's harvest into cold season. Though it has almost disappeared from spreads currently, it represents as one of those memorable creations that held both chronicle and soul in every morsel. Coconut stacked cake was the magnificent conclusion of any Sunday spread. Lofty and dignified with coating as pale as a fresh tablecloth. Mama split coconuts by palm, preserving every trickle of liquid and grating the meat delicate with waiting created of devotion. The tiers were tender and creamy, each one arranged cautiously, then blanketed in clouds of sugary coating that attached like ice. Every bite held a delicate richness, luscious but never substantial, with the slight crispness of garden coconut capturing the glow. It was a cake crafted for notable moments, Easter, returns, or when fellowship arrived visiting. You could sense the attention in every morsel, the variety that consumed all midday, but seemed deserving every instant. Youngsters anticipated by the surface for wandering fragments to descend, while grown individuals appreciated the cake like craftsmanship before cutting. It was the variety of confection that hushed a spread, not out of courtesy, but wonder. Coconut stacked cake was not merely nourishment. It was ritual, festivity, and remembrance blanketed in pale. Even periods afterward, the remainders remained tender, the coating tender and gentle. A portion of it could convert any afternoon into something holy. Evidence that loveliness could emerge from nothing beyond fat, sweetener, and soul. Black walnut pound cake held the natural woodlands directly into the festive cooking space with a scent unlike any other. Gatherers assembled the rigid-shelled nuts each autumn, splitting them cautiously to liberate the deep, bold kernels inside. The cake mixture, luscious with fat and eggs, absorbed the powerful, natural sensation of the walnuts, cooking into a loaf compact, sufficient to cut delicate and relish gradually. Offered at Christmas or household gatherings, the cake declared both festivity and the achievement of collecting nature's abundance. Youngsters assisted hull the nuts, their palms marked bronze from the husks, a seasonal symbol of distinction. Folks exchanged portions bundled in protective paper as presents, distributing happiness through the fellowship. Currently, purchased walnuts and manufactured cakes have substituted the practice, but the remembrance of that profound, almost toasted sensation remains for those who once savored a portion with coffee while ice descended outside and the dwelling smelled of seasoning and roasting nuts. Chocolate mayonnaise cake was the confection that converted economy into absolute brilliance. Created from scarce periods, it substituted dairy and fat with mayonnaise, incorporating tenderness that rendered every morsel luscious and silky. Mama would blend cocoa and sweetener into the mixture until it resembled like fabric, then dispense it into vessels that smelled mildly of Sunday meal. The cake elevated deep and uniform, its consistency tender as a treasure. Once chilled, it received covered with substantial fudge coating, beaten by palm, lustrous sufficient to seize the glow. Nobody believed mayonnaise could render something feel that pleasant, but one morsel eliminated all uncertainty. The sensation was profound, not excessively sugary, with a silkiness that rendered you shut your gazes for just a moment extended. Chocolate mayonnaise cake showed individuals that imagination could feel superior than indulgence. It was modest, resourceful, and absolutely delicious, an emblem of how innovative palms could convert anything into something deserving honoring. Offered after Sunday feast, it constantly vanished before the coffee chilled. Every fragment held chronicle, soul, and a signal that devotion, like quality cake, requires no elaborate components, just belief in what you possess and a purpose to distribute it. Carrot pineapple cake was the fruit-focused gathering champion that once dominated congregation basements and fellowship spaces. It was tender, compact, and packed with shredded carrots, pressed pineapple, and occasionally pecans, united together in a mixture that cooked into something fuller than the components suggested. African-American households crafted it for substantial assemblies because one vessel nourished numerous individuals, and its sensation seemed vivid even in the coldest periods. The cream cheese coating was the completing element, silky and sharp, distributing smoothly across the surface. This cake journeyed effectively, cut cleanly, and remained tender for periods, characteristics any congregation baker appreciated profoundly. But as markets saturated with bakery cakes and festivities transformed, carrot pineapple cake disappeared into the rear. Limited domestic bakers grated carrots by palm or unsealed containers of pineapple merely for one formula. Yet, those who recall distributing portions after lengthy Sunday gatherings still discuss about its delicate texture and mild richness. One morsel felt like fellowship, and a period when gathering spreads extended farther than anyone could witness. Applesauce seasoning cake was the innovative confection that assisted households extend components during restricted seasons, converting a container of applesauce into something delicate and warmly seasoned. It cooked up tender, aromatic, and soothing, seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a lushness that contradicted its economy. African-American mothers depended on it when garden apples were excessively costly, or when sweetener required to be utilized conservatively. The applesauce maintained the cake tender for periods, rendering it ideal for school meals, congregation feasts, or extended weeks when every portion of nourishment had to endure. The cake did not require coating. Its sensation was gratifying sufficient on its own. Over duration, as ease foods dominated and applesauce abandoned its position in domestic preparation, this modest confection drifted out of remembrance. But elder families recall how it saturated the dwelling with the aroma of solace and reliability. It was evidence that even during difficult periods, richness could still be crafted from basic things. Traditional scorched sweetener cake was the task of commitment that only the most deliberate elders attempted. A cake whose sensation originated from browning sweetener sweetener gradually until it achieved a profound honey hue. The caramel was blended into the mixture, providing the cake a cozy, almost toasted richness that distinguished it from anything else on the spread, rendering it demanded focus and talent. Scorch the sweetener excessively much and it became harsh, too minimal, and the sensation declined level. Households valued the bakers who perfected it, understanding the cake symbolized custom, remembrance, and the variety of preparation accomplished without hurrying. The coating, frequently crafted from the identical caramel foundation, blanketed the cake in a lustrous tier that dissolved on the palate. Over duration, as individuals shifted toward simpler formulas, scorched sweetener cake disappeared from festive spreads. Younger bakers discovered it daunting, and many never experienced the genuine to comprehend why elders cherished it so intensely. Currently, it endures mostly in aged notebooks and narratives shared across cooking spreads. But for those who recall that initial morsel, the sensation was memorable, striking, cozy, and packed with the history. Coconut cake was the lofty, pale cold season vivid confection blanketed in tender fragments that attached to the coating like fresh descended ice, rendering it one of the most lovely sweets on any gathering spread. The cake tiers cooked into tender, delicate circles that contained tenderness effectively, particularly when coated gently with sugary coconut liquid or basic syrup to intensify the sensation. The coating was silky and airy, frequently crafted from prepared coating or beaten cream cheese, depending on the household formula. And once distributed across the cake, it created the ideal foundation for the closing icy blanket. Portions of coconut were applied softly against the edges, descending gently across the surface until the cake resembled something constructed for festivity. Its sensation was airy, sugary, and revitalizing, presenting a chilled mellowness that harmonized the denser, fuller sweets around it. Coconut cake felt like gatherings, congregation assemblies, and festivities combined into one confection as youngsters extended for it, initially attracted to the icy appearance, while grown-ups extended for it finally, desiring to relish the mild richness. In the 1960s, fatback and cabbage was a signal that sensation did not originate from prosperity, but from understanding how to prepare with attention. It was a creation that instructed reverence for every segment of the animal and every foliage from the plot. Pork fatback and cabbage convert fragments into sustenance. Vegetable container tart with biscuit covering was one of the most resourceful methods to convert remainders into a soothing dish. My grandmother assembled whatever vegetables were remaining from the week, legumes, carrots, peas, or turnips, and cooked them in a basic sauce. She dispensed the blend into a vessel and blanketed it with biscuit mixture instead of tart shell, which cooked into an amber airy surface. The outcome was substantial, nourishing, and profoundly gratifying. Extending fragments into something that seemed like a Sunday meal. Each portion held both economy and solace, a signal that nothing from the cooking space was squandered. The biscuit covering provided the creation substance, rendering it a genuine feast instead of merely an accompaniment. In the 1960s, vegetable container tart with biscuit covering was frequent across dwellings that depended on innovation, converting fragments and remnants into dishes that loaded dishes and heated soul. It was endurance bundled in solace, nourishment that shared the narrative of innovative households crafting the maximum of what they possessed. Black walnut pound cake held the natural woodlands directly into the festive cooking space with a scent unlike any other. Gatherers assembled the rigid-shelled nuts each autumn, splitting them cautiously to liberate the deep, bold kernels inside. The cake mixture, luscious with fat and eggs, absorbed the powerful, natural sensation of the walnuts, cooking into a loaf compact sufficient to cut delicate and relish gradually. Offered at Christmas or household gatherings, the cake declared both festivity and the achievement of collecting nature's abundance. Youngsters assisted hull the nuts, their palms marked bronze from the husks, a seasonal symbol of distinction. Folks exchanged portions bundled in protective paper as presents, distributing happiness through the fellowship. Currently, purchased walnuts and manufactured cakes have substituted the practice, but the remembrance of that profound, almost toasted sensation remains for those who once savored a portion with coffee while ice descended outside and the dwelling smelled of seasoning and roasting nuts. Natural rice custard merged indigenous grains with African-influenced readiness to generate a creation both beneficial and gently sugary. Natural rice developed organically in shallow waters and gradual streams and enslaved households near these marshlands collected the deep grains with oars and containers, preserving them in the daylight for season-round utilization. Prepared gradually in liquid until delicate, the rice was blended with a touch of sorghum syrup or nectar if accessible, crafting a cozy custard that provided protein and enduring vitality. Its nutty sensation and gratifying consistency converted a basic vessel into a notable delicacy, particularly when garden fruit or seasonings could be incorporated. This formula held forward after liberation as African American bakers persisted to appreciate natural rice for celebratory dishes and household assemblies. Contemporary chefs still honor its natural lushness, but the narrative behind natural rice custard respects the blend of indigenous and African nourishment methods that maintained individuals through shortage and generated a confection that is simultaneously modest and profoundly established in the collective chronicle of America's marshlands and cooking spaces. Banana custard with vanilla biscuits was the confection that constantly emerged in the largest crystal container, the one transported with 2 palms, because it was loaded to the surface with tears of solace, chronicle, and household honor. Grandmothers arranged the foundation with vanilla biscuits and then dispensed heated handcrafted custard over them, allowing the cookies mellow gradually until they transformed into segment of the custard itself, delicate, sugary, and absorbed with sensation. Cut bananas were placed between the tiers in tender, pale circles, incorporating freshness that elevated the richness and rendered the creation seem vibrant. More custard arrived next, then more biscuits, and then another tier again until the container was almost brimming. Some completed it with beaten surface, while others demanded on meringue darkened in the stove until the peaks became amber. When the container reached the gathering spread, utensils rattled against containers, and youngsters hurried forward because everyone understood banana custard vanished rapidly. It felt like youth middays, like forward porches, like cooking spaces saturated with vapor and tones conversing over one another while confection chilled in the refrigerator. Banana custard was cherished not because it was elaborate, but because every household crafted it somewhat distinctly, and each edition held its own remembrances. It was the confection that connected families, one serving at a moment. Chicken wing broth was one of those dishes that would astonish contemporary ears. Since wings were once the cheapest segment of the bird, my grandmother purchased them in quantity when she could, accumulating them into vessels with onions, celery, and carrots. Gradually cooked, the wings surrendered their fat and sensation, converting delicate broth into luscious sauce. She condensed it with grain or corn powder, offering it heated over rice or loaf to extend it even further. It was untidy consuming, but nobody protested because the sensation was so soothing. Wings may be treasured currently, but in the 1960s, they were fragments converted into sustenance by resourceful palms. She stated every segment of the bird had worth if you handled it with reverence. Chicken wing broth held the essence of economy, converting what others rejected into something that saturated the dwelling with coziness. It was evidence that quality preparation did not depend on prosperity, only waiting and attention. Okra patties, also recognized as okra cakes, presented crisp, amber borders and a delicate center that honored the summertime plot. Garden okra pods were sliced delicate, blended with cornmeal, onions, and a touch of pepper, then distributed into warm fat until each cake expanded and darkened. Distributed at fish gatherings, congregation outings, and wandering festivals, these patties were simple to consume by palm and packed with sensation that connected African legacy to Southern territory. The okra provided a gentle richness and a tender adhesion that maintained the cakes tender, while the cornmeal covering presented gratifying crispness. Youngsters anticipated restlessly alongside simmering pans, wishing for the initial patty to chill sufficient to experience. Vendors bundled them in paper wrappings so households could wander through evening atmosphere filled with melodies and seasoning. Contemporary bite nourishments have substituted these handcrafted delicacies, but those who recall the noise of fat bubbling and the sensation of plot garden okra understand the patties held beyond sensation. They contained the happiness of assembling and the honor of converting modest harvest into a celebration of sensation. Pine spike tea presented a vivid and revitalizing beverage when garden produce was limited during frigid periods. Enslaved gatherers assembled the youngest verdant spikes from extended leaf and loblolly pines, cleansed them cautiously, and soaked them in warm liquid until the blend liberated a mild citrus scent. Abundant in vitamin C, this tea assisted prevent scurvy and delivered a pleasant freshness to cold season meals substantial with mineral-maintained nourishments. The The custom reflected both indigenous customs and West African botanical understanding, blending two continents' insight into a solitary maintaining vessel. Households persisted to prepare pine spike tea well after liberation, and it remains favored among contemporary botanists for its mild sensation and claimed immune-strengthening characteristics. Its evergreen aroma and cozy amber hue show us that even in the most desolate time, the woodland presented sustenance. Pine spike tea demonstrates how watching the territory and honoring its patterns permitted individuals to discover both remedy and solace, converting what others disregarded into a maintaining daily practice that fortified form and essence alike. Chest tart was the storage-accessible, gathering confection that demonstrated basic components could generate something memorable with only a limited movements of a skilled palm. Egg, sweetener, buttermilk, and a measure of cornmeal blended into a silky ivory mixture that cooked into an amber surface with a fragile split and a filling middle that felt sugary, cozy, and recognizable. The tart required no fruit, no coating, no embellishment, because its sensation represented powerful on its own, holding a lushness that originated from the equilibrium of silky filling and a trace of cornmeal consistency. At gatherings, chest tart rested quietly alongside the showier sweets, but it never remained untouched because those who understood it comprehended its strength. Each portion felt like custom economy and the imagination of bakers who crafted something notable from what they possessed on the platform. Fish skull broth was a creation created out of requirement, yet it held astonishing complexity and sensation. Fish skulls, frequently rejected by others, were cooked gradually with onions, potatoes, and rice until they surrendered every portion of lushness to the liquid. My grandmother demanded the skulls rendered the broth superior than cuts, presenting substance and sustenance that nothing else could. The bones and exterior seasoned the fluid until it became substantial and soothing. Potatoes extended the dish, rice condensed it, and vegetables incorporated substance, converting fragments into a nourishing meal. The sensation was powerful, natural, and memorable, showing everyone that no segment of nourishment should go unused. For Black households in the 1960s, fish skull broth was a frequent method to extend the harvest of the moment, guaranteeing nothing went to squander. It transformed into an instruction in economy and appreciation, evidence that endurance required imagination. Fish skull broth was both modest and powerful, maintaining households through scarce periods with sensation and custom. Cooked oxtails with rice sauce delivered profound sensation and gradually prepared lushness to Sunday spreads throughout many African American fellowships. Oxtails, once economical and disregarded, were seared in substantial vessels and then cooked for periods with onions, garlic, and seasonings until the meat became creamy tender. The cooking fluid condensed into a velvety sauce that attached to each kernel of rice, generating a creation that was equally segments solace and festivity. Households preserved this dish for weekends when everyone could assemble because waiting was crucial and dialogue emerged while the vessel labored its enchantment. Youngsters grabbed experiences from timber utensils, attracted by the flavorful scent that saturated the dwelling from dawn until dusk. The modest portion, once rejected by meat sellers, transformed into a focal point of honor and innovation. Currently, climbing costs and quicker preparation patterns indicate limited individuals invest the duration to extract such delicacy from a basic portion of beef. But those who recall the dish express of it as a flawless combination of economy, talent, and the gradual pattern of household existence. Maypop fruit blend converted the natural passion fruit of the American South into an uncommon confection saturated with tropical scent. Recognized as maypop for the noise of its empty fruit when trampled on, this indigenous plant generated aromatic amber fruits that matured in late summertime. Enslaved gatherers assembled the fruit, divided the covering, and extracted the vivid flesh into a container with a trickle of molasses or nectar when such enhancers were accessible. The outcome was an organically sharp delicacy that required no preparation and presented an explosion of nutrients. The sensation, a blend between citrus and melon, pleased anyone fortunate sufficient to experience it. Even after liberation, countryside households treasured maypops for preserves and tarts, and the vegetation remains a valued natural consumable throughout the Southeast. Maypop fruit blend maintains a remembrance of brief seasonal prosperity and the imagination that converted natural presence into into instances of festivity, demonstrating that even in the most severe situations, individuals discovered methods to savor the vivid, distinct sensations presented openly by the organic realm. Loaf custard with raisins was the cozy, economical confection that converted old loaf into something tender, sugary, and memorable at every household gathering. Grandmothers divided remaining loaf into fragments, drenching them in a blend of dairy, eggs, sweetener, and vanilla until each fragment absorbed the filling and mellowed into delicate forms, anticipating to prepare. Raisins were scattered throughout, incorporating tiny explosions of richness that swelled up during preparation, becoming tender and moist inside the cozy custard. As the creation cooked, the surface darkened into a mild covering, while the center remained tender, silky, and packed with sensation, saturating the cooking space with a scent that surrounded around everyone like a covering. Offered heated from the stove, it felt like solace, modesty, and the talent of elders who squandered nothing and generated everything from what minimal they possessed. Loaf custard showed households that sweets did not require to be costly to seem like devotion. Butter, legumes, and rice were another economical but soothing dish that sustained households through scarce periods. Butter legumes, with their silky consistency, were gradually prepared until delicate, frequently seasoned with a cured pork knuckle or bone if one was accessible. The toasted sensation infused the legumes and generated a luscious liquid that dispensed beautifully over rice. My grandmother utilized extended kernel rice that extended a vessel of legumes into sufficient helpings for the entire dwelling. The creation was substantial, nourishing, and beneficial, feeding both form and essence. Butter legumes were economical compared to meat, yet they held sufficient protein to maintain households functioning powerful. Youngsters discovered to value the tender legumes and tasty liquid as segment of regular dishes, and grown-ups acknowledged their worth in extending finances. It was not a creation of opulence, but of functionality, a feast that converted economical essentials into something individuals anticipated too. Butter, legumes, and rice shared the narrative of persistence in cooking spaces where every coin mattered and every dish required to gratify. If one of these neglected cakes brought back you of somebody who cherished you through their preparation, express it in the responses and press approve and follow so we can preserve these aged cooking space remembrances.